Okay guys, so once you've got your shoulders sewn in, this is right side out, so your work is going to look like this. And if I turn this around, okay, so that's what it looks like. I've just got my tails there that I'm going to work over later. So now you've got your neck opening. So essentially, this is going to fold in half, and there you go. So it's starting to take shape now, okay? And so what we're going to move on to next is working on our sleeves. So you're going to make two separate pieces, and I've already done one here to show you guys. So we're going to reintroduce our gray for the cuff of our sleeve. And so you're going to make one panel that looks just like that. Let me just get these guys out of the way. Okay. So we're going to start from the bottom. We're going to create our rib here, our rib effect, by using chains, single crochets into the back loops only. And then we are going to work sideways, back and forth. Now there will be a few spots where we will do some increasing. So you should be able to see that it kind of starts narrow and juts out a little bit. And we do that on purpose because your cuff, usually if you've got a tapered cuff of a sleeve, it's usually a little bit narrower than up closer to the shoulder. So I know that for this size, which is a toddler T4 size, the wrist should be 5.5 inches all the way around. So when I worked this rib, the cuff, I started with my chains and then I went back and forth, and I did as many rows as I needed, which in this case is 23 rows. And that got me my 5.5 inches, okay? Now, I also know that the arm depth, the hole, is 5.5 inches. So that means that when it's folded, that is the armhole depth. So this whole length will equal this half length. So in essence, I need to have at least 10 to 10.5 or 11 inches at the top. And that is why we need to create some increases a little bit as we go along the way. So I'm going to take you through that next. It is much easier than maybe it sounds like, but as you can see, it's just a big old rectangle essentially, and then we're going to fold it in and attach it. Now you can see it. It actually starts looking like a sleeve, right? Okay, let's get you started with the cuff. Okay. So we're bringing back in our gray velvet yarn, and you'll notice I am switching back to my 5mm hook, and this is the one I was using all along when I did the bunny. Now remember, if you watch the bunny square, you'll know I went up a hook size when I was using the pink because it's just slightly a little bit on the lighter side, even though it is also considered a medium weight 4. So let me just find my end here. So we're going to do our sleeve. So like I said, we're going to start with the cuff and then work our way up. So to do the cuff, you'll begin with a slip knot. So we're going to begin by chaining 6. And you want to keep these chains, as always, a little bit more relaxed. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? So I know it's velvet and it's gray. It might not be easy to see. So what we want to do is we want to find the second chain from the hook, 1 and 2, and we want to single crochet into that. And it doesn't matter. So you just want to place 1 single crochet, and then you want to do 1 single crochet into each chain stitch till you get to the end of the row here. And I've just got one more at the very end there. Okay, so your work will look a little something like this, which may not look like much, but you will have 5 stitches at the end. So I know we chained 6, but then we used the second chain from the hook. So we're going to have 5 stitches back and forth. Okay, you will then chain 1 and turn your work. And now we're going to work into the back loop. So instead of going into the stitch, which hopefully you can see that, we are going to work into the back loops of these stitches. Okay, now I've chained 1. I'm actually going to skip this first stitch here, and I'm going to go into the next one, and I'm going to do a single crochet. So this will be the second stitch, so our chain 1 counted as 1. And then I go into the back loop of the next stitch and the back loop of the next stitch. So this last stitch will always be your chain 1 from the previous row, so you might just have to turn it around. And there I can see the top of my V there, and I hope you guys can see that too. I know the velvet's not easy. And I just insert my hook into that loop, and I single crochet. Okay, so already you can kind of see, and even though it's velvet, you can still see that by going into the back loops, it's created this little ridge here, and that is what we're going for. This is what creates a little extra elasticity in your cuff. Okay, so then at the end of each row, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work, and you're going to do the same thing again. You will skip this very first one, you'll go into the second one, single crochet, then you find the next back loop, so this will be your third stitch, and then you'll find your next back loop, which is right there, which is your 4th stitch. And then lastly, our 5th stitch is that chain 1, and usually that's a little bump here, and I'm just going to insert and pull through. Okay, so you can see the ridge effect that's happening there. Chain 1, and I continue on. So for me, I'm doing mine for a toddler size, so I need 23 rows. And then your work will look something like this, and you can see the little ribs there, and that's because we worked into the back loops. Okay, so do your 23 rows, and then I'll meet back up with you when we're going to reintroduce our pink. Okay, so I have my 23 rows done, and so my work looks like that. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to snip my yarn, and I'm done with that gray. Okay, so we've got our cuff here. I'm just going to pull this through, just like that. Okay. So if I take my other sleeve, they should be fairly even. Okay, now this one obviously has bunched in a bit, and that's because we've worked it. So not to worry if that happens. Sometimes your work will stretch a little bit, especially as you crochet on. Just always double check. I know that I have 23 rows. This is also 23 rows. Okay, so moving on to the upper part of the sleeve now. Okay, so I am now going to go back to my 5.5 millimeter hook, and I'm going to place a slip knot on the hook there. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I am going to work along the sides of my rows. So it doesn't really matter which side, because they both look the same. I like to start where one of my tails is, and that was my starting chain right there. So I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to slip stitch to join. Whoops. Just like that. So now I'm going to begin by chaining 1, and I'm going to use half double crochets now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to half double crochet back into that same stitch. I'm not really going to count that chain 1. I just needed a little bit of height. Okay. And so I have 23 rows. I want to work 1 stitch into the side of each row. So I should have 23 rows 23 stitches at the end. So I kind of use these ridges to guide me. Hopefully you can see that there. So I've gone into this first chain here that was a non-ridge row, and now I'm going to find a spot somewhere at the end of this ridge row. And usually there's a little spot I can nestle my hook in to do a half double crochet, just like that. So the next stitch I'm going to place somewhere in the groove in between the ridges. So I know it might be tricky to see with this velvet yarn, but I'm going to yarn over, just find a spot somewhere in between. I want to try and get at least a couple of loops. Just for me, I feel like that makes it feel more secure. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to go into a ridge row. So I'm going to go into the top of that ridge and half double crochet. Okay, now I'm going to go in between the ridges and place a half double crochet. Okay, so your work is looking a little something like that. That's what I'm going to do all the way to the end, and I should have 23 stitches in my case. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end of my first row of the sleeve, and that's my last stitch right there. And I do indeed have 23 stitches. Okay, so you can see now that it's already started to kind of cluster a little bit together. So that's row 1, 23 half double crochets. Row 2 is now going to be a repeat. So we're just going to chain 1, turn our work, and I always like to go right back into that very first stitch and half double crochet. I don't always do that. Sometimes people will do a chain 2 for the height of their stitch and move on, and there's plenty of projects where I will do that. For this one, I'm doing a chain 1 and going back into the same stitch. Row 2, you're just working into the stitches, nice and easy, just 1 half double crochet into each stitch. You should still have 23 stitches at the end of row 2. So hopefully you can see this a little easier. I know with this velvet it's tricky, but you know, once you get a little bit more experience, you can feel your way through. So I can feel there's a stitch there. Okay, and if you're ever uncertain, just turn your work like this and hopefully you can see the top parts of your V's there. Okay, so go ahead and finish row 2, and then in row 3 we're going to do our first increase. Okay, and here is the end of row 2. So your work will look something like this, and it is natural for it to already start to bow out like that because remember we were working into the sides of stitches earlier. So row 3 of our sleeve we're going to increase. So we're going to increase on each side, 1 stitch on each side. So we do want the sleeve piece to just flare out a wee bit. Okay, so I'm going to chain 1 as I usually do. I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm going to place, hopefully you can see that better there, I'm going to place 1 half double crochet into the very first stitch like I've been doing, and now I'm going to place another half double crochet into the same stitch. So we've increased the number of stitches for our row right there by doing that. Now every other stitch is just going to be the same thing. You're going to do 1 half double crochet, just the same thing of just placing 1 stitch inside each stitch. And then once you get to the end of row 3, you're going to do the same thing at the end. And remember that was our starting one, so we'll have a chain 1 somewhere in there. So you're going to place 2 half double crochets at the end. This will increase your stitch count in row 3 from 23 stitches to 25. And this is my very last stitch here, so I'm just going to place, make sure I've got a couple loops in there. I'm going to place 1 half double crochet and then a second one back in that same spot. Okay. So at the end of row 3, just Just going to set down my work like that. See, you can start to see that it's just starting to flare out like that. Okay, for the next little while, your job's going to be super easy. You're going to chain 1 and turn. And now for rows 4 through 10, that means 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 inclusive. You're simply just going to do 1 stitch into each, back and forth, no increases. So you're going to go ahead and do that. Probably going to pause the video there. And when you've done up to row 10, meet back up with me here, because in row 11, we will do another increase. Okay, so I've done my 10 rows, so my work looks something like this. Now we're starting row 11, so I've chained 1, and now we're going to do an increase again in this row. So that means I am going to insert right away into that very first stitch, and then I'm going to place another stitch right back into that same one. So I've increased first stitch to 2. So in row 11, you are going to end up having 27 stitches. You're going to increase at the beginning and then just do 1 half double crochet into each stitch across, and you're going to increase at the very end. So at the end of row 11, you want to have 27 stitches. Okay, and this is the last stitch here of row 11, and I'm adding 1 and 1 more. So my increase is done at the end. So now you can see it's starting to flare out a little bit more. So these are subtle increases, but they are increases. So now from rows 12 through 19, you're just going to again just do 1 half double crochet into each stitch. So we've just finished row 11. So row 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 is just 1 stitch into each. I'll meet back up with you for row 20. Okay, so at the end of row 19, your work is going to look something like this. There's a very, very subtle flare out. Okay, it's super subtle. And now we only have 2 more rows to go. We're going to do another increase in row 20. So you're going to increase 1 on each side. At the end of row 20, you're going to have 29 stitches. You're going to increase 1 more time. You will then end up having 31 stitches. So finish these last 2 rows and then snip off your yarn. Your sleeve will be done. And then we are going to put our pieces together and start doing some sewing. Okay guys, so we are ready to put our pieces together. So I have taken my piece and I've opened it up, so the 2 that I've already sewn, so that the inside or the wrong side is facing me. And now I'm going to take my sleeves and I want to open the wrong side facing up. Okay, so I'm going to have all the wrong sides facing me. So I've already gone ahead and figured out which side I would like to be the right side or the wrong side. So for me, I've got this little ridge here that I wanted to make sure both of my sleeves matched up. I'm not sure if you can see through that, the velvet there, but so these are my right sides. So this is what the sleeve will look like when it's seamed up. So, but what I'm going to do is we will be opening this so that the wrong sides are facing up, just like this. And then we are going to take our darning needle and I am just going to whip stitch this together. Okay, now the thing that we want to be sure of is to get the center of the sleeve here to match up the center of the shoulder. Okay, so the easiest way to do this is we're going to fold it up like I had it originally. And remember that we now have 31 stitches, yeah? So what's going to happen is you are going to place a stitch marker in the 16th stitch because that is perfectly in the center. But, you know, if you're not crazy about counting, I know a lot of you are not crazy about counting. The easiest way to do it is to fold it exactly in half like this. And wherever that crease sits, you are going to place your stitch marker. And because I'm a math person and I do love to count, I know that 31 is an odd number, so 16 will be the stitch sitting right in the center. So that's what I want to do with this sleeve and that sleeve. I then am going to do the same thing here. Now, we know that, well, in my case, I only did 3 rows of the shoulder. So I know in the middle row or the end stitch of the middle row, that's where we should attach to. So that's what I'm going to do right here. And in fact, I'm just going to take this, oops, let me just rejig that there. So I'm just going to find the side. So see, there's 1, 2, 3 rows I did. So basically I'm going to go into the side of the middle row. So this is a good thing when you do have odd numbered rows, that it really kind of helps you position things. So I know this looks a bit loosey-goosey, but these 2 center points are the very first thing, the most important thing to tackle first when you're sewing your pieces together, okay? So once you have your center, I will then match along here because we're stitch to stitch, and I will place a stitch marker or a pin on this end and this end. And what that does is it really solidifies and secures that I have the exact same number of stitches, because we don't want our work to buckle at this point, okay? When you construct your sweater, you want it to sit nice and smooth and seamless, okay? So I'm going to do that on this sleeve, and then I want to do the same thing on the other sleeve. You want to find the center point first to match this center point, attach it, and then make sure you match up your stitch count along the way and then attach on either end. It just is a foolproof way of just making sure you've got the exact number of stitches. Once that's in place, I am then going to take these, see how it's still the wrong sides are facing out, and I'll begin on one end and I'm going to whip stitch it. And just really simple, I'm just going to start here and move my way down. So I'm going to get these put together, and then that is it. We're going to sew up our sleeves to our body, both sides, and then I'm going to pick it back up with you there, and then we are going to fold our piece, and our top is almost done. Okay, so remember, pack your patience, take your time, and count your stitches. Okay guys, so I have my sleeves sewn in, so I've got all these long tails here that I realize I'm going to use them for sewing later. But what I would recommend is, if you're a little bit newer to crochet, sew in the little ends that you had, the little tails, sew them in first so that they get out of your way and they don't frustrate you. I'm a bit more experienced, so I have some extra tails here, but I'm actually going to use them to sew in my project. Basically, you're going to have something that looks like a kind of a big fat T. So there's the back, the front, and the 2 sleeves. What you're now going to do is you're going to take it and you're going to fold it down so that now your right sides are facing out. And this just gives you a chance to see how it's going to look. So see, now you can see that it's really looking like a sweater. Now, make sure that everything aligns nicely and you like how it looks. And then what you're going to do is you are going to actually have the right side facing out, because we always want to try and sew it from the inside. So the right sides are now facing up. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're just going to take it, fold it down. So that's the back side there, just like that. And again, if you're a little inexperienced, or if you're a little bit less experienced, I would now go along and just pin, like maybe pin the corners here where they meet and at the end here. And so now we're going to seam up. I would start here from the bottom, Okay, so you've got the bottom here. I would seam up the side, around the underarm here, and all the way to the cuff. Now be careful here because the cuff has changed color, right? So I left a bit of a tail there that I'm going to use to sew in my cuffs. I would stop with the pink right there, and I would cut my yarn and fasten off. I would then finish sewing the cuff with the cuff color. Now, if you didn't leave a long enough tail, just grab another piece of yarn, and it's only about 5 stitches there, and just go in and sew in with the same color. So you want to make sure that the color you're sewing in with matches the part of the project, okay? So earlier when, we were talking about maybe you have a little bit of bumpiness here, all of that is going to disappear once you start sewing in your seams, okay? So you're just going to go up the side, under the arm, under the sleeve, and do the cuff. You'll then fasten off. You'll go to the other side and do the same thing. And you're all the while, this is wrong side out. Seam, seam, cuff in the cuff color. And then you are just about finished. We're then going to turn our sweater right side out, and we're going to add the collar and the ribbing at the bottom. We're almost there, guys. So finish seaming up your parts, and I'm going to meet back up with you shortly. Okay, I have seamed up all of my sides, and now I'm turning my project right side out. And here we go. Look at that. It is now looking like a sweater. So we've got our cuffs there, sleeves are done. So now we just have the final finishing touch, and that's just to do a little rim around the collar here, and then do a little bit of an edging on the bottom. And I'm just going to work over these tails here, but all the other tails on the inside have all been woven in. And yay, super exciting. Okay, so I'm going to bring back in my gray yarn, gray velvet yarn here, and put that over there. Okay, so we're going to start with the collar just to make it nice and easy. I'm going to bring back my 5mm hook, because this is slightly thicker, and I'm going to place a slip knot, and here we go. So you can start anywhere along the collar. I like to start a little bit kind of around the back area here, just in case there's any seaming issues. So you can just kind of basically find any stitch, just insert your hook and slip stitch to join your yarn. Okay, and I'm going to work over that tail. So we're going to use the half double crochet again, that stitch. So I'm just going to chain 1, and I'm going to go right away and half double crochet into the same stitch I just slip stitched into. So I'm not really counting that chain 1 as anything. And that's because I want these stitches to sit nice and snuggled into each other. Okay, just like that. And so for this first round around the collar, I'm not going to do too many. We're just going to do 1 half double crochet into each stitch all the way around. So pretty straightforward. And again, if you're new to using velvet yarn, just take your time. I promise you it will be worth it, because you'll just love the end result. So just be patient and feel out where your stitches are. Okay, I'm just coming up to our first little corner there. And what I'm going to do just to smooth out the edges is I'm going to stitch 2 of these together. So I'm going to, so I've yarned over, I'm going to insert into this little, basically it's the corner join there. I'm going to insert my hook into there and pull up a loop like I normally would do, but I'm not going to resolve this stitch just yet. I'm going to yarn over again. not everybody does that, but I like to do it once in a while just to kind of snuggle in the stitches. And now I'm going to go into the side. So remember we did those 3 rows here over the shoulder? That's where we're going into. So this can be super tricky to see because of course the velvet yarn is interesting. So I'm just going to snuggle in, try and pick up at least 2 loops. And what I mean by 2 loops is to kind of snuggle inside 2 loops of the side there and pull up a loop, okay? You've got about 5 loops on your hook. I'm going to yarn over, and now I'm going to resolve the whole stitch. So I'm going to pull through all 5 of those loops, okay? And see what that does? It just kind of snuggles that corner in and it rounds it out nicely. And then I would just continue on, and I'm going to go these 3 rows here, just going to go into the sides of these stitches. So I'm going to find the spot that I think feels and looks good, and I'm going to half double crochet, and I'm going to go there, and again I'm working over that short tail, and then I'm coming up to another little corner here, okay? So I'm going to insert there. Now remember, with crochet especially, it's not an exact science because, you know, different people have different gauges and things like that. So just kind of go where your eye, where it makes you happy. Okay, so this seems like it would be the obvious place, but I don't want that to leave too much of a gap. So I'm just going to dip down a bit lower and pull up a loop there. See? So it just kind of snuggles it in, and then yarn through all 3. And I think that time I did not yarn over the second time, but as you can see, you go with the flow. There we go. Okay, so now it's just kind of come up around the corner, and now I'm back into working in regular stitches, and I just continue on doing 1 half double into each stitch for this first round here. Okay, and I'm just about done. Okay, and so we've come to the back seam here, and I'm just going to find, if you can, the first stitch. Remember that chain 1 didn't really count, so I'm just going to make sure that I get into the full stitch there. And I'm going to slip stitch to join. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that out so that you can see. Now we've got a nice accented collar. Okay, so I like the gray on the cuffs and the collar, and we're going to do the bottom trim. Now the bottom trim will be exactly how we're doing the collar, so you might want to pay close attention because I'm not going to repeat it again because it's the same technique. The difference is you may do a few more rows on the bottom, because what we want to do is we're going to create this similar ribbing effect, but we're not doing it in the same fashion we did the cuff. We are going to use some front and back post techniques. So those of you that have seen our Beyond Basics tutorials on the front post crochets and the back post crochets, that's a great tutorial for getting you ready for this. I will put a link down in the description box down below just in case you need a bit of a refresher. And but for now, I'll just take you through a quick little refresher. So we're going to create a little bit of a ribbing. So we're going to begin the next row the same way. We're going to chain 1 and half double crochet right back into that same stitch. Okay. Now, in the next stitch, instead of going into the stitch, we're going to work around the post. So I'm going to go in between these stitches. See that? This is the post coming forward. So we're pushing this post forward. This is called a front post technique. So we're doing a front post half double crochet. That is a mouthful. Okay, so you make sure you yarn over first like you normally would, and then you insert behind the post, yarn over, pull up just like you would a regular one, and then you resolve the stitch. Okay. Now the one beside it is going to be a back post half double crochet. So after you yarn over, instead of going in through the front, we're going to go in behind. Okay, so this can be a little tricky if this is your first time doing it, okay? Just take your time. So if I just pull the stitches apart there, you can see the spaces. I'm going to slip my hook in behind and across in front to come out the back. Okay, so now I've pushed the post to the back. I will yarn over like I did before and pull up a loop, and you just want to be careful you don't catch the other loops on the way out. Keep it relaxed, and then yarn over and pull through all of those stitches. Okay, and you might be able to start seeing it now. So this front post is creating a ridge effect forward, and that back post is creating a ridge effect back. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to alternate between front and back, front and back. So I'm going to do another one. Into the next post, we're going to do a front post. So I'll go in through the front, push it through, pull up that loop, keeping it relaxed, yarn over, and resolve. Okay, so now you can kind of start seeing the ridging. Now the next one's going to be a back post. So I'm going to go in through the back and then push that post back as I go around the other side. Yarn over and gently pull it through not to catch the other stitches. And then yarn over and pull through all three. Okay, so I'm not sure if on camera this will come across as much, but in real life you'll see a ridging of forward, back, forward, back. Okay, so that's what you're going to do all the way around, and now it's just one into every stitch. We don't have to stitch two together. In fact, you don't want to do that because that would make your head hole smaller, and you want to make sure the person or the child can fit this over their head when they're putting it on. Okay, so you're going to continue doing that all the way to the end. Front post, back post, front post, back post. I'm going to meet you back up here at the end just to kind of take you through the next round. Okay, and I'm back up to my back seam again. I just finished doing a front post double crochet. I've got one more post here, and it's going to be a back post double crochet. And then I just have my regular half double crochet that I'm going to slip stitch to. So don't worry if it feels like you've got two back posts together or two front at the end. That's why I kind of started in the back, so this could be seen as a seam. So if I just pull that up where we slip stitched, you won't really be able to see that too prominently because again, this is going to be on the back. So I want to keep this collar really simple and nothing too over dramatic. The little toddler I'm making it for, she overheats quite quickly, so I don't want to make this too tall. You could do a few more rows if you wanted to make it more like a cowl type of collar that fold over. But I'm going to keep this trim nice and simple with just that one row of ribbing. But I am going to add a finishing round of single crochets. So now that I've slip stitched to join, I'm just going to put a very simple finishing touch for round 3 of the collar. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go back into that same stitch, and I'm going to just single crochet now. And as always, keep them a little bit relaxed, your stitches, okay? Because this is going to be the collar, and we don't want it to be too tight for the person to put on. And that's it. So you're going to do 1 single crochet all the way around. You'll slip stitch to join at the end, and you'll snip your yarn. And you're just about there. And here I am again. I just stitched the last stitch, and now I'm just going to slip stitch here. And we are done. So I'm just going to grab my scissors and snip my yarn. And then I will weave in this end here. Okay, so there you have it. So see, it was just a little added touch, just gave it a little bit more height in the collar. And there you go. I love it. Okay, so you are going to do the exact same thing for the bottom edge here. Okay, so again, I would recommend maybe starting in the back somewhere, or even if you want to start in the side seam and go all the way around. So your round 1 is just simply one half double crochet all the way around. Now here we're working in the round, so you don't have to worry about these little decreases we did in the corners here. So one round of half double crochets. Round 2, you're going to do the front post, back post ribbing, okay? You may want to do a round 3 for the bottom to make it just a little bit longer. Like if you find that your top ended up being a little bit short, this is where you can kind of make up for it. I am most likely going to just keep the same number of rounds because I kind of want it to match the cuff here. Also, I kind of saw this top as a little bit, not a crop height, but not something that was going to be too long on her. So I'm going to do the exact number of rows that I did for here. A half double crochet row, a front post, back post row, and then a single crochet to finish. So in total, my edging will be 3 rows. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to do that. And then I'll meet you when we are absolutely done our adorable velvet pullover. Okay, and here it is, our finished Velvet Bunny Pullover sweater. I am so happy with how it came out. So we've done the collar, and I went and I finished the bottom trim here. I did the exact same thing, only 3 rows here, using front and back post. And I am so thrilled with how it came out. So we've got the little bunny on the front, and the back, I just kept it nice and plain. So you can see I used a granny square motif in the back. And yeah, the cuffs came out really nice, and I am so excited to deliver this to the little one I have made it for. So guys, this is it. I hope that you had a really fun time working on this. This was a sweet project for me to work on. Definitely made it with tons of love, and I look forward to seeing it on this little person I made it for. If you have any questions at all regarding the pattern or how it goes together, you know you can always leave me a question or comment in the comment box down below, or you can always email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. You guys know that, right? But for the most part, I hope you found it surprisingly simple, right? Because it was just using half double crochet stitches and double crochet stitches for the most part. And then we just had to refresh our memory on how to make a circle. But other than that, I think that most fairly newer crocheters should be able to accomplish this with no problem at all. And I am so excited. I can't wait to see how your color designs came out and what colors you guys chose to do your pullover sweater. Now remember, if you haven't subscribed already to this channel and you really are enjoying these tutorials, make sure that you do so. This helps you stay up to date every time we upload, which is every Wednesday morning. And we also throw in a couple of other videos here and there called the Crochet Quick Chat, which is a segment I use to answer your most common crochet questions, okay? And if you like this particular video, make sure to leave me a like, a thumbs up, and that way I'll know that you're enjoying this type of content, and I will work on making more things like this for you guys, okay? So my friends, thank you so much for coming along on today's little crochet journey. It is always my pleasure to share my love with you. And I wish you well. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. I always want to wish you happy crocheting and take good care. I'll see you guys in the next video.